number one is hydration. The food has to be high in moisture. A lot of people feed their dogs with dry food and they don't put any water on it. They think that this is okay because it's the dog food. But what happens with the dry food, so this is the same amount of dry food and same amount of water, which this is what we did. And about 5 minutes, when it stays 5 minutes, it's like there's nothing in it. All right? So what happens is the dry food, if the dog eats the dry food or a cat eats the dry food without any moisture, they have to have moisture from somewhere. So that moisture comes from their own body. So the kidney, all the muscles are giving out the moisture into the tummy so that the food can be processed. What happens is that the animals are living in sort of semi-permanent state of dehydration. What happens next? Cat 5 years old, what does it have? Kidney failure, kidney problem, urinary tract infections, stones, all kinds of things. So first thing first, if you ever feed anything to your dog, you have to make sure 1 cup dry food, whatever it is, and 1 cup of the same thing water or broth.
Yeah.
And you can talk about broth.
Yeah, and generally, because a lot of the time when we mention broth, people going on like, oh, it's a very fancy way of cooking, I don't know how to cook, how I'm gonna make it. But it's actually very, very easy. We can just show you, because so Yuli's gonna show you, this is just 1 bowl and you can mix whatever meats you have at home. It doesn't have to like, especially for that, you can leftover meats, what kind of meat, chicken livers and fish, just really any kind of meat you can put together, and then just
take
put
lots of
water and boil it, and that's it. So and then 10 minutes later you can just go chill or whatever and you get a broth. So it's really simple like that, and you can always store it in the fridge for maybe 4-5 days and then just heat it up if you want to eat again and mix it with the food.
So that's it. So the broth, generally when we say broth, is just water from what's been cooked in.
Yeah.
So there's nothing special to it. In fact, with dogs and cats, you must not put any spices. The next one is high protein. So dogs and cats are carnivores and we have to feed them proteins. Protein has to come from animal. So as a carnivore, they cannot eat tofu and get the same amount of protein that the human body can get. So we must ensure that they have some meat. What meat it is, it's up to people who can afford. So for instance, people in the provinces cannot afford, full chicken once a day for a dog. It's impossible. But they can maybe afford chicken stomachs and some leftovers from their dinners, and maybe go to a restaurant and ask for restaurant's leftovers, and then you put that meat together and it actually makes sense. When the meat, oftentimes what we say to people who cannot afford the meat, what we say is, if you take leftovers from your food, soak it in the water so the spices go away, and then give the meat to the animal. I mean, you have to be creative. When you don't have a lot of money, you have to be creative. But it still would be better to feed that food than feed dry food only. When we talk about diet, we only now talk about the animals that are healthy, okay? So if your animal has a particular problems with liver, with kidney, with digestive tract, with whatever it is, diabetes, then of course your diet will change. So whatever we're covering at the moment has to do with healthy animal, right? So high protein diet for dogs and high protein diet for cats. Extremely important to remember that cats do not eat any of this and do not want any of this, and their body rejects all of this. So the cats are what we call obligatory carnivores. So make sure that your cats only eat meat. So if you give cats rice, yes, they will survive, but they cannot really survive for a very long time. They will very quickly get sick. They will be either overweight or underweight. They will develop all kinds of diseases, and they will usually die quite early. The next one is very important, is low starch, okay? So when we cook our food, you're noticing that we're using sweet potato, okay? You can also use pumpkin. It's very cheap and it's widely available in Cambodia. You can grow it yourself if you're in the provinces. Sweet potatoes have much less starch than white potatoes. White potatoes are very, very high in starch. That's why when you cook it, the water becomes almost like a broth, like it's kind of sticks. So we use either pumpkin or sweet potatoes, and sometimes we mix both, okay? So when we talk about starch, of course, we have to talk about rice. Right? Because everybody thinks, well, rice is good for us, that's why it's good for the animals, right?
And also in Cambodian, people would think the main food is
rice. Yeah, like in my country, the main food is usually potatoes, and so we often boil potatoes for their animals. And especially white rice is extremely high on starch. So if you don't have means, if it's not, you can't afford not to put any grains in your food, what you do is you put a little bit. Just put as little as possible, because this is as cheap as rice. So if you have to make a choice towards the vegetables than towards the white rice. And you know, there's always an argument like, well, but there might be maybe some grains. So if you have to put some grains, it would be dark rice, because dark rice is much lower on starch. So, and again, it has to be sort of a smaller amount. And it's cheaper, exactly. So there you go. Of course, you have to have nutritionally balanced food, right? So people go, okay, so you cook your own food. What do you put in it? I don't know what are the ingredients. So the ingredients, first thing you have to think, for the dog, it's carnivores, but they also are very good with eating vegetables, and vegetables are good for them. So about 70%, maybe 60%, depending on what you can afford. You want to give them as much fish and meat as possible, and then the rest you can do with the additional things like vegetables, eggs, a little bit of a natural yogurt. We put things like a pumpkin and sweet potatoes, we put carrots, we put broccoli, we use beef, fish, and chicken. We use about 5% of liver. We use also the internal organs of the animal. It's good for them. One note though, that the vitamin A is extremely high in liver. So you don't want to overfeed liver in the diet. So it should be only about 5% of the entire meal. Okay, 5 to 10% of the entire meal. All right, we put a little bit of coconut oil or olive oil inside, and we also sometimes we use turmeric. So a little spoon of turmeric, and also you can use greens. You can use kale, you can use any of these things to cook the food. Broccoli, broccoli is extremely important. Let's say you cannot afford to buy this. I mean, this is for people who can afford it. One animal, they have a lot of money. You can always go for sardines. The box of sardines is very cheap. It's about 50 cents. And this box can go twice. You can feed your animal twice within the rest of the meal. So you open a box of sardines, you put half of the box and half for the next day. And you mix it all together and you offer it to the animal. So actually, the overall cooking is what will take time, but the amount of money that people save on the long term is huge.
So just to questions for the Cambodians, well, usually generally go towards Cambodian. You mentioned yogurt, so would you like to explain? Because if a lot of, well, I mean, foreigner, Westerner, yogurt is their food, but for us here, a lot of people don't even know what yogurt is. So you think it's really important to add it into the food, or it's kind of like optional?
I mean, I think it's optional. So basically it depends on the diet. If the diet is balanced, then they have vitamins and minerals, and they have fish, which gives them calcium and omega-3, 6, 9, and they have vitamin A, and they have a bit of turmeric, and then they have all of these things covered. They have their minerals and vitamins coming from the meat. Then generally speaking, yogurt is not so important, because they will get from all of this, they will get enough probiotics in their body, in their gut system, to work really well. However, sometimes if you get any type of dry food and you feed them only dry food, there's zero nutrition in it. When I speak of yogurt, I speak of 1 spoon on a whole dish. So it's tiny little bit. It's only unsweetened. It has to be unflavored. And it's only a little bit to help the stomach to work better. And it's the same that happens to people as well. If you're only eating rice constantly, you'll have constipation, you'll have lots of gas, things like that. The same thing happens to animals. So you always want to make sure to give them a little bit of help. We talk about a species appropriate diets, right? And a lot of people go like, well, you know, I cook for my cats and for my dogs the same and they're just fine. I have to, we often explain this to the customer that totally different things. I mean, it's like feeding a human baby and feeding a tiger baby. Completely different diets, right? So it's the same thing. When the dog can take the nutrition from vegetables, from sometimes from fruits, from meat, from yogurt, the cats must have animal protein as the main diet. So another question is, people would buy dry food because they feel really bad and they go, well, I feed the dry food to cats and dogs, and it's really the same. It's not the same, because cats need to have much more fat in their diet and dogs need lower fat in their diet. So if you give cat food to a dog, they'll go obese. They'll go quickly very fat. If you give the dog food to a cat, they will quickly become sick because they will not have enough taurine, which is a very specific mineral, vitamin that comes from fish. And also they won't have enough fat in there for the feed. I remember cats always hunt for meat. They always eat meat. The dogs in the wild can get some cherries, can get some strawberries, they can get some, if you give to the animal, for instance, some carrot, the cat will sniff and go away. The dog can actually chew it and really enjoy it. So remember, species appropriate diet is necessary. Cats are meat eaters. Do not give cats any rice. If you have to do something, maybe some vegetables, maybe become a bit more creative, give some vegetables, but try your absolute best to offer them as much fish and meat as possible. Some fish is really cheap, right? In the market. And then if people live in the provinces, the good thing is that they can buy it from fishermen. They can buy tiny little fish from the fishermen and they can cook it for a long time.
Which is even better because it's organic.
Exactly. It's like perfect food, right? So, and they can cook it for a long time so that the bones are soft and then they can offer it to the cat. So the note on the bones, by the way, the bones are really dangerous. And even though we think that the bone and the dog is kind of related and they need to be always with the bone, it's really dangerous because the bones can splinter. And the splinters can go through, they can get stuck in here, they can get stuck in any process before they are eliminated. So the bones, although there are some good things about bones, they also present a very serious danger for the animals. All right. There is another issue of puppy diet, right? How many puppies do we get?
All the time.
All the time. We get a lot of tiny little puppies, maybe 6 weeks old. They are bought from the pet shops and they come immediately with dry food. And they're on dry food right away. And this is a crime, basically, against the puppies. They are used to drink mommy's milk all their life. There's 8 or 6 weeks of their life. And suddenly, they're taken away from mom and they're given dry food. They have no idea what this is. They often given dry food without even water. So that tiny little body, whatever water it has, it just processes this dry food. The whole gut system is completely destroyed very, very quickly. Their growth is usually decreased and slows down, right? A lot of puppies come in with serious gut problems. They cannot poo, they have constipation, they have diarrhea, they refuse to eat completely, they have problems with blood. And as soon as we switch them to a more nutritious food, to the more home-cooked food, and especially tiny little ones, they don't need much. So if you give them the food that you would eat, they'll be just fine. So as long as you don't give any pepper,
no spices, and usually what you would tell the customer, I really like it, because then when she say it, the customer will go like, oh, so what she usually says is like, imagine if you're giving your baby, a little human baby, cookies. or like snacks all day.
Or McDonald's.
Yes.
So imagine the little child that comes from the mommy's milk and from the formula, and then you go like, that's it. From now on, all you eat is McDonald's. So that's pretty much the same thing that we do to little puppies. And so of course we know that McDonald's meal can fill your stomach and you'll feel full, but if you're constantly eating the same thing, eventually your organs will start shutting down. Okay, so that's one thing to remember. So when you get your new puppy, make sure you give them a lot of water, a lot of broth, and you cook for them. And it's the easiest thing in the world. A lot of people go, oh my God, I have to cook for my dog. So if you have a dog and you cook this, it will take you about 2 hours, and then you can separate them and freeze some of it and then put in the fridge some of it. So in 2 hours you can cook for your dog for the entire month. And it will still be nice, fresh, nutritious food that your dog will enjoy and will grow really strong. A lot of people say, but why? Why should I do that? Because your system has to be, immune system has to get strong. If you get a good nutrition, you save money on the vets. It's as simple as that. Okay.